Welcome to explAInED. On the podcast today, we have Patrick Dempsey, not the Patrick Dempsey that I thought was coming to the podcast, but probably a better version all around. I'm just going to say that. Patrick, welcome. We usually start the episodes by asking people to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their journey in AI, but then also tell us what AI means to you.
Wow, that's deep. And I do appreciate, as I like to riff on the Patrick Dempsey reference, there's nothing more disappointing than when I check into a hotel, because there's like this anticipation. Could it be? Will it be? And then it isn't. And then I offer to take blurry, selfies and sign autographs. Full-time, I'm the director of teaching and learning at Loyola University, the Maryland version. And do a ton of stuff on the side, as we all do. So consulting, working for startups, had my own startup. Bringing that entrepreneurship into academia. And AI, I just feel like it came out. As a team, the first thing we did was type in a job description for an instructional designer. And then we're like, we probably should write our own job descriptions for instructional designers at that moment. And it's been a journey ever since. Was the chief learning officer for a startup that was basically training small and medium businesses on what we might call AI literacy, just really getting them up to speed to start realizing the benefits of AI in their workflows. And geez, what does AI mean to me? I think I'll explain it in the way that I like to talk about AI, in the sense that I think it's the opportunity for the pedagogical reflection. So I think it's a really cool tool. I think the more you use it, you realize that it's probably going to get better. It's probably like Craigslist at this point. And it's an extension of your expertise, right? It doesn't work without you. And the better you are at your craft, the better it can be at helping you with your craft. So that's sort of the frame I take to it. I'm super bullish on the potential in education, but more for the opportunity to reflect on just good teaching.
So I'm going to use a big word that's not typical for me in the podcast, but you have a prolific way of writing and thinking that really pulls people in a way that I haven't seen in a lot of the AI discussions. And it's really, really great. But one of the things that you talk about a lot is how AI isn't threatening education. It's exposing flaws and challenges that have been there for a long time. So how do you talk to people about, how do you take somebody from that mindset to a more open mindset, like you're talking about the potential that's there? What are the steps that you take somebody through when you're talking about that?
So I think it goes with anything, and I shared something recently about this. Basically, thinking about it as the awareness ladder and then the marketing funnel. So we have to really bring them up to the awareness, and then bring them down to a solution. And the trying to force someone, it doesn't work. And I think that the best opportunities that I've seen are helping folks that are really new, that maybe are nervous, one, to realize that they still have a role to play. It's a lot of, well, if I want to do this, am I giving up a ton of control? Like what will my purpose be? And then other folks are just like, I need to teach for 10 years, so I better get on board. And then when you expose to them, well, look, it wouldn't even be practically feasible for you to just reinvent your course with AI, would it? Like, could you just redo everything? And they're like, no, I wouldn't even have the time. And some stuff I have already works. And so then you're like, okay, well then what are some ways that maybe you could reinvent something that you did on the one hand to get like really imaginative, or just support what you're doing really well? And we talk about like doing it as using AI as an assistant in your course, like replicating yourself as a bot, using it as a resource to help students as opposed to a reading, maybe they in a monologic sense, have a dialogic interaction, or actually improving your activities. I probably wouldn't say improving when I was talking to a faculty. I would say amplifying the activities that are working really well already with AI.
And what is your, I mean, we always meet great people like yourself, and we want to know how your brain works. So we probably don't have enough time to do that, but how are you taking in and processing this? You write a lot, you speak a lot, you're doing a lot of connection points, but there's also got to be this internal kind of structure that you're using to process all this stuff as you go.
It's all very fluid, and I think we all want to have the humility to say we're definitely sort of making this up as we go along. We're definitely calling back on the pedagogies that we have long since felt were the answer to what we've maybe seen as challenges. I think overall, I'm thinking of AI Fluency and as this is a great opportunity. So AI Fluency, but grounded in content expertise, right? And we have sort of these competing views of, I'm going to go back to the blue book, which is like legitimate, right? And people are really all about this, but I use it as a heuristic for explaining the process of having students memorize things for a specific period of time, which we take to be this exemplification of all these other skills on the one hand. On the other hand, we're like, teach the skills that AI can't do, these human skills like critical thinking or learning to learn. And both of these are right in a sense, and both of those are wrong, because cognition requires content expertise. And so this is the way that I'm framing and thinking about AI, is going back to this idea that we can't teach sheer memorization. Our minds aren't file cabinets. They're more like spider webs. And we can't just vibe teach. We can't just be like, oh, what do you want to learn? And that's subject matter expertise. So I think that's what's so cool about this moment is it comes back to subject matter expertise, domain expertise, that the more that you know about something, again, the better AI becomes an extension of your skills.
You recently had a chart that went viral on LinkedIn about policy versus literacy. We've had a lot of discussions about the term AI literacy and how it's kind of lacking. But it seemed like you teased you're working on an alignment tool to help guide school districts on, developing policies built on trust instead of on fear. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, thank you for bringing that up. That was like a great moment for being on LinkedIn, right? Like when your average post is like 300 impressions or 1,000 is like great, and then it goes like 110,000 right now, and it was crazy. And then I was like, how do I do that again? So I just posted it again, and I got like 40,000 impressions. So like, I'll just keep doing this.
There you go.
And it came out of, you're right. That's the algorithm. Just keep doing what worked. It came out of like I posted about that second time, like two meetings, two committee meetings, and one was a AI on-ramp that we had created, some faculty had created, and the first part of it was for other faculty was to how to write a policy to keep students from using it in your course. And I thought, well, that's at best ironic. And then the other committee was the technology committee, which was like the word we need lockdown browsers, right? We got to bring these back into the classroom because there's no other way for us to know if students know. And like, I was sheer just like, can we just call it rage? It was a rage graphic. I was just like, I got to like put this out there. I am so annoyed. What am I annoyed about? What am I actually saying? And so it became that, side-by-side comparison, which was obviously not like objective. Like I was obviously saying this AI policy is like is a retreat into ignorance and naivete and fear and control, which is, why it really resonated, I think, because it was like saying what people were feeling and it put it out there. And so, so it occurred to me that again, logistically, practically, potentially, strategically, everyone isn't going to have hologram teachers in the next 5 years, right? So if we're going to just think about it in that sense, but AI fluency in a sense should be a goal because it's just a way that people are going to think in the world. we're going to be thinking with these as partners in our journeys. And so that's what this alignment piece is to say, what are the major constraints that you have? How do you actually approach this? Is it ethics or outcomes? Do you approach this at the institutional level as strategy or tactics? At the faculty level, is this individual or is this aligned? At the student level, are they involved or are they leading or are they following? And then pedagogically, are we sort of reinforcing what we're doing or are we reimagining? And that sort of gives you a starting point as an individual, as a team, as an institution to say, this is what's going to shade our approach to getting to sort of this AI fluent state. And then, of course, it all comes down to like practical implementation in the classroom. How do you help an instructor think about those ways from like reinforcing what they have to reimagining what's possible?
Right. And you're looking at it through the lens of higher education. We're looking at it at the lens of K-12. And so in thinking about, I'm at the high school level, so we're trying to think of it through the lens of preparing students for future work, or higher education and then future work. But I think that this strategy will work at all of those levels.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate that so many K through 12 educators engaging with the content, because I do purely come from my doctorate is in K through 12 curriculum instruction, but I'm just not a practitioner. Yeah, I appreciate that it does resonate across. And I think there are similar but different challenges and approaches. Obviously, the younger someone gets, I think the more fragile it becomes and important it is to do it with care. But I also think that when I do these things with my young nephews, that how they interact with it shows me opportunities I've never would never have thought of. So,
okay.
I've listening to you talk right now. You've used the term AI Fluency quite a bit. A term that we hear a lot is AI literacy. And I was just wondering if you would view those as interchangeable or distinct terms.
Again, not going to be the authoritative voice on this, but the way I think about it is, and the way that I've seen it presented is, literacy is sort of like, okay, how does this thing work? And really, when we're talking about AI and all of this, right, we're just talking basically like LLMs and like associated tools. So the way I see it's like, how does it work? And then basically I see them like, it hallucinates, it has bias, you have to be careful, you have to use it ethically. And that's like, okay, I'm literate in this thing. And then fluency is, I approach it again as the extension of cognition, of your subject matter expertise. And so that to me is the big distinction, is like knowing about the thing and then using it well on the other hand.
Mm-hmm. And so has that message about fluency, is that like really what, because, well, let me back up a little. You've written about kind of being the person in an organization that's trying to like get something going or have change. And like, and obviously in this case with AI, is the fluency idea, does that help get people to take a first step? Like, oh, my cognition is still the most important thing. That the AI will just help. Does that kind of get you going?
Yeah, that is to me to give the framework to help us understand where we should be going with this thing, and that it's not. It's basically just demystifying what it might look like, and I really can conceptualize it as a Venn diagram and a flow chart of domain expertise on the top, connecting to tool or workflow experience, and then connecting on the other side to output experimentation. And so with that domain expertise being in the middle, that really does, again, I think help center these poles and these tensions that I see all the time of reverting back to rigor or going to vibes. And it is all about cognition. The tools are going to change. The way that we could maybe start thinking about training students in the way that Renee was talking about, of like getting prepared for higher ed or work beyond, is what I think AI also shows us is that we don't understand our work. We don't understand our workflows. We don't understand what it means to be an expert, because we say, like, as teachers, we're like, I know an A when I see one. Well, let's unpack that. And like, what does that actually mean? Because in some world, we should be able to create like an LLM that replicates our work if we're clear enough about what it is. And so I think that is really where I do come at it, is like, let's center it on the content expertise. Let's reimagine what you do as a teacher, as an educator, as an institution, because that still is the primary value proposition. It's not access to it, but it's the ability to help with it, help think with it.
At the college level, how do you, so we've talked to a few folks at the college level, and it's really interesting. We hear a lot of mixed reviews from the student lens on their eagerness or their awareness or wanting to entertain AI in some ways. And some of it depends on their content expertise. So if they are artistic or creative, there's kind of a passionate, reaction to that. But then there's also the discrepancy of going from one professor to another and how they allow it or don't allow it and all of those things. What are you seeing in general from the student lens at the college level that is influencing your work in your direction?
Yeah, we actually had a ton of data because we 10x'd our Turnitin license this last semester. And what we found was students weren't outsourcing their thinking. The high flags on the AI, maybe they were just good at workflows, right? Maybe they were maybe they were laundering their ideas from Grammarly to GPT to Gemini, back to Claude, back to GPT. But in any case, they weren't big. I think, we do have this conception. We always have. It's not new, that students don't want to learn. Like, how many times? They just don't want to learn. They're lazy. But they do. I mean, this is a customer in higher ed that's paying a ton of money for the credential, for sure, but for the experience and the education. And so I think there are students that are, I see a ton of stories on LinkedIn that are wary that they've heard that maybe it's going to limit their ability to think and to become experts if they just outsource everything. So I think there is a ton of opportunity to hear how students are using it. I see great posts about all the different uses that students have that are just beyond the imagination that we would have for how they use it to augment their experience in a course. And so I think, we want to involve them in the conversation, hear how they're using it, hear that they want out of it. And I think that will also help us be somewhere in the middle of the polls and really learn some great uses for them. Because I think to say that we're going to be the ones that prepare them also overestimates what we can do, because we're not experts. We don't know where the workforce is going. And it's not just vocational training that we're preparing them with. So we're doing our best guesses pedagogically. And that's where I think we always want to limit our input. And again, they are best guesses at this point.
I would argue what you said about the students laundering. I think there's some value in that. Like, just that process of, there's some critical thinking going on there. Not the way you want them to use it, but
maybe. But again, to the workflow idea, like if they're like, this is how I actually get to that end product. And that's why I like this fluency, is like the student who knows more about the topic, who knows more about the tool, and who experiments more with what it produces, and then starts again at the top, like, this is why it wasn't good, or this is what I want. This is just a new way to think about cognition, or it's just a more explicit way, and it's not just pragmatic. It's just like, oh, this is actually what we do when we call this thing called expertise.
Mm-hmm.
It's also putting value on the process, right? So in education, we get stuck, taking that end product as the goal is to produce this end product, but you're talking about a way to emphasize the process as well, which is really kind of cool to think about how we do that connected to expertise. I really like that connection. That's really cool.
I have a question. A lot of what I'm hearing at my level is concerns around assessment. Have you seen any assessment redesign that really impresses you around the use of AI or avoiding the use of AI?
I don't know. I think creative avoiding. I mean, I can talk about the blue books all day. I think it's the funniest thing ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
those things were in my nightmares.
yeah,
Those blue books.
literally I won't. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering about the history of them, and it's really interesting. Just like why they're blue and all that. Anyway, I forget the actual story, but
that could be a research question for Mike.
I think that we end up doing also one or the other, like process or product in these, and I think it definitely is both. And I think what's really exciting, you hear a lot, I see a lot in my feed about project-based or problem-based learning, which I think is super exciting. I definitely can envision a future where students, it's probably true already in institutions where students aren't getting degrees, they're solving problems. We're treating them more like solopreneurs as part of like an entrepreneur accelerator, for lack of a better description. So I could totally see that being a preferable future for how we handle higher ed. So yeah, any project-based learning, challenge-based learning, I think is really interesting. And then I think what AI gives us the ability to do is, and I wrote about this, and I didn't know anything like about how practically this would sort of happen in the book I published in 2021. Like, it gives us an opportunity to actually assess, if you quote unquote, not grade out of 100, but assess if it's their emergent learning. So what are new things that happen because you've learned this? And in the book, I talked about a challenge of where learning objectives become the ceiling rather than the floor. And that's really why we measure the output. Like, oh, once you can define this term or once you created this thing, that's it. Like, you're good. But this is like literally not how anything works. So the idea that we could actually identify with an expert using their expertise and AI to identify emergent themes that are coming from student learning, in particular over time. So like, how are their habits of mind changing? How is their workflow with these tools and the content knowledge changing? And how are they using these to produce unexpected outcomes? So I feel like that's such an exciting opportunity to explore. And as the tools get better and get actually grounded in pedagogy, as opposed to just outsourcing assignment creation or grading, that will be really interesting to see. And conceptually, you could do it now. I mean, you can actually just do it right now if you create yourself a good enough prompt.
I was talking to some folks the other day. We're in June, which in K through 12 public schools is a weird month. It's the end of the school year, and everyone kind of transfers from this present school year to starting the next school year. And we were talking about budgeting, and in particular, we were talking about translation costs. And I kind of just tossed it out there. I said, by the time we come back in August or September, Gemini might be in Google Meet. We might be able to have live translation in Meets, and that would totally change how we're doing translation services for families and caregivers. And the room just went silent. And then I got thinking, like, that's just this much of the change that's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 months. What are you seeing that you think when you come back for a fall session, what's like the next, hey, well, you guys were cruising this summer. Here's this. What do you think is going to show up?
Oh gosh, not a prognosticator at all. It does change so quick, and I think that's definitely what I've heard from faculty, is that they sort of give up, they opt out because of the overwhelm is the word that I hear over and over again. And that's why I think this concept of fluency is so important. It's like, okay, let's imagine what it would be like to do an assignment in a way that you leverage whatever that tool was, but that capitalized on what you do well. So I can't even imagine, because it's just literally every day. It is crazy. So I think it's the Superhumans newsletter that every day just makes me feel existential dread. And I'm like, oh, that's such a cool tool that I have no idea about. And I'm just like getting better at doing deep research or something. So yeah, and like you say, the uses that we can think of are based on like our relative experience of like technology and our exposure to these tools, where like behind the scenes or whatever in these big rooms at Google, I mean, we saw like Project Astra, right? Where like you're wearing the glasses and then you're just asking the world anything. I mean, overlays on glasses, real time, the whole thing is going to change, and that's why I feel like there's such urgency behind it. I was posting about the 2047, like the students this year are going to be graduating, if college is still a thing in that year, in 2047, and like literally we're rolling out the blue book. Like, what are we doing at all to prepare for a world that is going to be so drastically different? I think they will really look at these AIs, whatever happens in it, as the Craigslist, or as the like, no one even know, I'll say microfiche, and no one even knows what I'm talking about. Like, it was a thing when I was a kid. Like, you would find the thing and you'd put it on the thing and you'd move it around. And that's how you would find like an old newspaper article. I'm not that old.
No, I remember it too.
Yeah, we were to do that.
Renee, cancel that custom blue book that we were going to send you.
Oh, okay.
That Etsy order is not going to happen now.
I think too, Patrick, to that point, my teachers sometimes ask, like, how are we supposed to prepare kids for this future with AI? What's it going to look like? I don't know.
Well, definitely, it's definitely not going to be a blue book.
No. Maybe it is. Who knows? Some kind of digital AI blue book. But I think too that it takes some reframe. Like, a lot of what you post about is reframing, and I see the definite need for that, in my situation. But I think, how do we even start getting people to shift? I was reading the post you had today about the ladder and the funnel, and I thought, oh, that's brilliant, meeting people where they're at. And what the big idea that I'm hearing from people is, well, I guess we have to give into it. It's not going away. I guess I'm a police officer now. So what is your advice for maybe a first step for those in leadership facing that type of attitude?
I definitely am of the belief that, although institutions will approach it differently, that a vision is not, it's more imagination than specific direction. And it's putting out the idea that these things are changing. I mean, this is just true, right? Everyone knows. It's not AI. It's been technology generally. Like, again, this idea that these things were already not working. Our students were already opting out of the assignments that we were giving them. And this was going back, I think I was posting soon about, like, there were shows in the 70s that were like about academic integrity, where like people were writing notes on their shoes or whatever it was. This is old. So I think that leadership needs to cast the vision, help us understand where that we are going somewhere, and that's going to take effort, and then offer whatever those pathways are. Because ultimately, again, it comes down to, unfortunately, like, teachers in whatever role, like, implementing this in some way into their teaching practice, and funding it more than just, here's this literacy framework, or here's this one-off workshop. And that's why I think what I'm trying to do is really help folks understand that there's a lot of steps along the path. Every path doesn't lead to the same goal, and doesn't have to. I think there's a lot of interesting strategic market positions for schools in K through 12 and in higher ed along the spectrum. But it has to come from someone has to say where we're going. Again, whatever that is, right or wrong, however accurate or inaccurate it ends up being. And then helping the folks who are implementing it have a shared language and a shared understanding of what it takes, and then obviously implementing it. Even the smallest opportunity to do something interesting in your course that engages students, engages the faculty or teachers in a way that they say, okay. Because I think what I found is the more you use it, the more you realize it's not scary at all. The more you realize that it's really not great. It's pretty cool, but you can't really get it to do what you want all the time. And there's a long way before it's going to do that for us.
Patrick, you officially became my favorite Patrick Dempsey.
Thank you so much. It was a crowd of two, and the other one you probably don't know personally. And if you met him, you probably like him more because he'd probably take you out to a fancy dinner, maybe drive you in a race car.
Hey, I'm going to stick with my choice right now.
All right, I'm holding you to it.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this. This was great. This is fantastic. And I've got to figure out how to. You still didn't quite tell me how your brain works, and I'm determined to figure that out by reading all of your posts and continuing to follow you and ask a ton of questions. So,
also holding you to that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.